Welcome to the Redemptive Economics Podcast, where we are empowering Christian entrepreneurs to make a redemptive economic impact here in Pittsburgh and beyond.
Let's get to work!
Welcome to the show. My name is Mike Hatch. I am your host, and I am grateful that you joined us today. Today, we are speaking with Valerie Bowden. Valerie helps businesses find top-tier remote talent and optimize their sales operations by tapping into the talent market across many African countries, an area that is underrepresented and vastly underestimated in its talent, pricing, and reliability. It all started when Valerie left her home in the Midwest to solo backpack across Africa. She spent 7 months traveling the Cape to Cairo route. After that, she lived in Ethiopia for 8 years, and during that time, she stumbled into outsourcing, and what a fabulous win-win it could be if done correctly. She has spent years working with businesses across all industries to level up their sales and rise above the competition with one simple action: choose Africa. As possibly the most underestimated continent in our world, numerous countries in Africa are home to some of the best remote talent with prices that can't be beaten anywhere else on the planet. Through Valerie's company, Cradle, she helps match other companies with the type of talent they need, hire, onboard, and train them, all at a fraction of the cost of outsourcing to any other country and with exponentially higher standards and skill sets. You'll see this was a great conversation with Valerie, and I'm just really excited that she calls Pittsburgh home. So you'll hear about that too, how they made their way to Pittsburgh and how she compares Pittsburgh to Africa. You're going to love that. All right, here is our interview with Valerie Bowden. So Valerie, thank you so much for being with us today. I am so grateful to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to have you and really excited to expose what you're doing and the incredibly redemptive things that you're doing to our audience here in Pittsburgh. Of course, it's going to be beyond as well, but especially Pittsburgh. So Valerie, let's start first of all. I just would love to hear a little bit of background on you personally. Your faith background. Did you grow up in a Christian home? Did you not? What did that look like for you? Some people, it's like a lightning strike, right? And they're like, bam, God hits them and suddenly, wow, I've come to faith in Christ. Other people, it's more like a process. So yeah, just curious about what that looked like for you.
Great question. I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I did go to a Christian school, was in the church twice a week, and I also went to a Christian college. So for me, it was more of a journey. Okay. But looking back, I would say that a lot of the Christianity I grew up with was very legalistic. And it wasn't until I really got out of that bubble, and especially when I lived overseas and could really see how Christianity is sometimes different, like the American influence sometimes on the Bible, where I started to get a different perspective in a healthy way and to come out of that legalism and really find more of a relationship with God.
Okay, so then your family had a church background. You grew up in the church. I know you went, I think it was Indiana Wesleyan, right? Is where you went to school?
I went there. Okay. I majored in social work and psychology. And then I also got my master's at Barry University, which is a Catholic school. So definitely a product of Christian education.
Yeah, multifaceted, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. What was your motivation to go to Africa?
That's a great question. My entire life, Africa was the one place I wanted to go to. When somebody said, like, where do you want to go? I said, Africa. And that was before I realized how big the continent is and how different the countries were. So after college, before I even did my backpacking trip, I did 3 months of volunteering in Ethiopia with Bethany Christian Services.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Mm-hmm.
So I was working with adopted parents who were coming to Ethiopia to adopt.
I see.
And that gave me a really good glimpse of how there are some great nonprofits, some bad nonprofits, and what missionaries were like on the ground, the good ones, the ones that maybe need some more support. So it was eye-opening kind of in a negative way, I would say, other than the fact that I loved Ethiopia. And that was different because in my head, I was picturing like poverty and everybody lives in huts. And no, it's like the country that invented coffee and the food was amazing and people were nice. So then I came back to the US, I got my master's, and I could not stop thinking of Ethiopia. Every day I was thinking about it. And that's when I was like, I have to go back, but I don't have any money because I'm out of grad school. So I'm going to start in South Africa and I'm just going to backpack until I get there. And that was the cheapest way I could travel. That's how it came about.
Oh, that's crazy. So it was all about getting back to Ethiopia.
Always. Yeah. I just felt like it was this mountaintop experience. Does God have a plan for me there? Why can't I stop thinking about it? But if Ethiopia was different than what I expected, what are other African countries like? So my aunt was supposed to go with me actually to South Africa. I think she had some friends that were missionaries there and she backed out, but I still went. And I thought I would go for 6 weeks. And then as I was traveling, I was like, this is awesome. This is so much safer than I expected. I'm having the best time. And then my trip turned into 7 months long. So very different than what I originally planned on.
Okay, you are completely destroying all sorts of stereotypes right now. You're sharing this because people think about backpacking across Africa because you'd think of countries like the Sudan and Central Africa and these really dangerous places, right? But you experience different.
Oh, I don't even have a scary story. Like my stories are like, I got lost and somebody helped me. But statistically, African countries, the majority of African countries are actually safer than the US. And when I was in Sudan, it's different now since they're going through some conflict. But when I was actually in Sudan, it was the safest country of all. So it's really sad how the media has portrayed African countries to be worse than what they are, or like a single side. So yes, there are some problems, but if you balance it out with the good things, it's a more of a balanced story. But unfortunately, that's not really where the media goes. And so we don't really know what African countries are like until we're actually there and visiting.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Interesting. Yeah, it took me, it was a big, you mentioned this before, it was a paradigm shift for me to realize how huge Africa is. You're just used to spinning past it on the globe, but man, it's bigger than the United States, isn't it?
I think if you put the US, India, like most of Asia, it all fits in the continent. So one thing I found is if you're like in the US and you go to Canada, not a lot has changed, like subtle differences. But if you're in the US and you go to Mexico, suddenly everything changes. So that's how I felt crossing African countries. It was more of a US to Mexico situation where you like cross the border and it's different language, different religion, different food, different history.
Country to country is it country to country within the continent of Africa?
Everything is different. And that's what makes traveling Africa so cool is that every country is so different. So you have a completely different experience. So if you are planning a trip to Africa, try and see at least 2 countries because then you'll see the difference.
Okay, so for those of you who are just listening and not watching this on YouTube or Rumble, I would probably describe you, I'm seeing you from your shoulders up, as a kind of petite, brown hair with some blonde highlights.
I'm not scary looking.
White American girl. What kind of impressions did you get from people? You know what I mean? I'm wondering how you were received too.
I definitely have no survival skills. Definitely none. Yeah. Despite there being so many untrue stereotypes about African countries, one thing that is true is like hospitality is a really big value in a lot of the countries. So everywhere I went, people would say, this is how I'd want someone to treat my sister or my mother or my wife or my daughter. And so I experienced so much kindness that I can never give back. And I think that motivates me to what I'm doing today is that I finally have the chance to try and do a little payback for all the good kindness that I've received over the years.
Oh, that is so cool. Okay. And you mentioned wondering about God's plan for you as you went over there. And obviously, many of us will go on, what do you call it, odysseys, or I forget there's a term that I'm thinking of that's not coming to me right now, but that trip to go find ourselves, basically. What did you discover in terms of what God was telling you or communicating to you during that time?
Well, I still wasn't exactly sure. When I was backpacking, I wanted to see what was working on the continent and what wasn't. And so I did stay at like missionary houses that my family knew or that my church supported, or I'd hear about a nonprofit working with schools or a tech hub. So the whole time I'm traveling, I'm having fun, but I'm also stopping and trying to figuring out, like, as a social work major, what kind of development is working and what's not. And that gave me my first taste that jobs are needed, and maybe the best way to do it is more through business than through the nonprofit sector. Not always, but that was what I think I felt most led to. And when I was traveling and I got back through Ethiopia, I was like, this is it. This is where I want to be for a while. And it just felt like total peace. This is where I should be. And
Wow.
so that's how I decided to stay there for a while.
Seneca Hills Bible Camp and Retreat Center is a hidden gem located just north of Pittsburgh in Venango County. Personally, when I attended their men's weekend, I was blown away by the beauty of the surroundings, the quality of the facilities, and the superiority of the cuisine. This is not your typical camp food, folks. Seneca Hills hosts year-round retreats and conferences, but their true passion is summer camp, where campers, both kids and adults, escape the everyday tyranny of screens and distractions and immerse themselves in 250 acres of God's gorgeous creation. Go to SenecaHills.org or call my good buddy, Executive Director Lyndon Fowler, to learn more about how Seneca Hills Bible Camp and Retreat Center can help you, your kids, or your business create unforgettable memories, meaningful friendships, and a deeper understanding of God's love. Okay. And what was your purpose for staying in Ethiopia as long as you did during that time?
Okay, again, I got a job offer for 6 months after my trip. So I went
really?
to Cairo, went home for Christmas, got a 6-month visa to go to Ethiopia. Again, told my parents, only 6 months. And then 8 years later, I finally...
Oh my gosh. Your parents are probably freaking out this whole time. I'll bet they were so worried about you going on this trip.
Poor mom, right? But
Yeah.
after 2 years of being in Ethiopia, I met my husband, who's Ethiopian. So that was part of the reason why I stayed. And also because I really loved Ethiopia. It's a really funky country. If you like coffee, it's like the best place to be. And it's developing. So every day you go out and there's like a new startup or a new building, or it's just like, it's developing so fast. It's very interesting to be in. And I just did different kinds of business the whole time I was living in Ethiopia, trying to figure out what was the best kind of business and what kind of business did I want to be a part of. And so that started my journey.
Okay, so you spent a lot of time there doing your homework, researching. Some people would call that market research, right? You're trying to think about how to get this thing going. And what I love about it, though, too, is because here's what a lot of Christians will do. They say there's the corporate world, the business world, and then way on the other side of the spectrum is nonprofit, missions, that kind of thing. And what I say to people often, as redemptive economics would insinuate, like, it's much more like this. Your business is your mission, and your mission is your business, right? Mm-hmm. Do you run into that at all as you're developing this, like people maybe having those misconceptions?
Yeah, I think a lot of people also assume that I was like a social enterprise, like as if they were like afraid to say like a business can do good and not just be a social enterprise. But I found two things. One is that my background in social work has been a really big blessing for business. One of the biggest core values in social work that you actually have to sign off on is do no harm. So don't even try to do good, just do no harm. And I think especially when you're working in somewhat vulnerable communities, it's something you always have to keep in mind. So at Cradle, yes, I want to do good, but I'm also more importantly focused on just not doing any harm. And then the same thing when it comes to faith. One of the reasons why I love working with faith-based people is because they tend to be actually more open about working on the African continent. They've had a little bit more exposure to different countries, that maybe they've gone on mission trips there or their church sponsors someone there. So if I talk about hiring someone from Zimbabwe, they're so much more open and so much more willing to see them, I think, in a holistic way, and very kind when they do start working with them. Yeah, I think faith goes with business, not like nonprofits and social work and all of those. You're right, they're all intertwined.
Yeah. I've been waiting to get here, and I think I'm gonna move in this direction now. Tell us a little bit about what's wrong. What's wrong with the way that we have gone about trying to help the marginalized populations, specifically in Africa? And honestly, majority of them are nonprofits, I believe, or what they call over there is NGOs, I think. Give us a little bit of your perspective on the lay of the land.
There's so many things. I'm actually so happy you're asking this question. And there's a lot of research, like when helping hurts, like it's all of those kind of principles. Yep. One of the biggest thing I think is you go there with pity, trying to help, not seeing how capable they are. And then a lot of our good efforts have actually done harm, right? So when you're buying Tom's shoes, they're donated shoes, but basically wiping out the shoe industry in those local countries. Or when you're sending a shoe box, you're wiping out like the toy industry there. Or when you're doing, let's say, a pity product, so you're trying to create a job, but you're creating this really ugly bracelet that like a 4-year-old back home could make. What are you really saying about the capabilities of the people that you're supposed to be serving.
Yeah.
I know the first time when I was in Ethiopia, there was also a lot of missionaries and nonprofits who just would not register with the country. So they're basically illegally operating. And it was very much like you're coming to help, but you're not willing to follow the local rules of that country. So that's not okay. And if all of a sudden Kenyans came over to the US for a 2-week trip, didn't know anything about the US, and said, we're going to fix this problem that we heard you had, and then they gave you a solution that was just weird and not helpful and then hurt local businesses, we'd be like, get out of here. What are you doing? Yeah. We don't need this. We know what we're doing. But we do basically the same thing to African countries.
Absolutely. I look at Africa as being one of the most exploited continents, people who on a continent that there is. I feel like every different first world country, if you want to call them, have come in and just suck them dry of their resources and use and abuse them. Have you seen that as you were there?
Yeah. A lot of the big aid is, I think, it's not free. There's strings attached to it. And so, both on the larger scale, and it's just not effective. Like, I lived in Ethiopia for 8 years, and I can't tell you much of what U.S. aid did, unfortunately. Or I can tell you the bad things and like the ones that I know who took the bribes and stuff. And it's not all bad, but it's just not working in the way I think most people think. And I think the other thing when it comes to like nonprofits is that most of them, not all of them, but most of them aren't needed if people have jobs. A mom can buy her kids their own shoes and their own Christmas presents if she has a good, sustainable job. And you don't have to donate clothes if people can afford to buy their own clothes. And so not that we have to stop at all that aid right away, but it doesn't fix the long-term solution and just makes people dependent on the aid. So if people just have good jobs, then most of the work we're doing isn't really needed in the first place.
This just popped in my mind. I'm going to throw it out there and just see how you respond. Man, this might be controversial. I don't know. People might not like what I say here. It almost sounds as if we as a country have gotten very comfortable in our entitlement programs, that we're outsourcing those entitlement programs to places like Africa. Does that ring true at all?
100% what we're doing there doesn't make sense. And we're creating dependency. We donate shoes, we end their shoe industry, and then they don't have shoes, so then they need the shoes that we donate. So it's really sad. And the worst thing about it, I think, is that we fail to recognize all the wonderful things that we could learn from African communities. And that's been one of the best things of having an Ethiopian husband, is I've seen, wow, the Ethiopian culture does something so much better than America. Like, they know how to do community. They know how to do healthy food. They know how to do a lot of things that we could learn from them. And so because we think we're like superior and we can help them, we fail to see how we could learn from them.
Oh, that is such a great point. Wow, I love that. Okay, so how did you and Alula meet? I want to hear that story.
He was my neighbor, but we had never met. And then my power went out. And so I was like trying to talk to the guard to help him get my power back on. And I was new, so I didn't know the language yet. So Alula walked by, heard me trying to speak in this horrible accent, translated for me, got my power back on. And then we just became friends and then eventually dated a couple years later. But the funny thing is, do you know that song Valerie by Amy Winehouse? He was listening to that song when he met me. So I was like, oh, that's funny.
Oh,
like,
I'm sorry. I missed that connection you were trying to make. Now I get it. Oh, that is hilarious.
God knew that we were both so stubborn that he just like made him listen to the song. This had my name on it. And we met at that same time.
Okay. And so I assume he has a faith background?
He grew up in Orthodox church, which is more, I would say, like Catholic on steroids. So Christian, but more. So we actually related a lot when it came to the legalistic stuff and growing up in a church, and then later reflecting that some of those rules maybe weren't as biblical as we thought they were growing up.
Tell us a little bit about why and how it came to be that you are now in Pittsburgh. You think you live in the South Hills, I think is what you said, right?
So we were loving Ethiopia, and then we had our son there. And then it's not really a great story, but basically it's really hard to travel if you have an Ethiopian passport. He applied to come to the US on a tourist visa, got denied, even though we had been married. We tried to go to my sister's wedding in Europe. His Ethiopian passport got denied. And it just became one of those, we need to all be on the same passport. So we came to the US and then had our daughter when we came here. So we have 2 kids now. And it was just nice for him to be back and see where I grew up and know more of my friends and family. And then I don't know how long, if we'll stay here forever, if we'll go back, or if we'll be in between. But yeah, that's how we ended up. And he got a job offer in Pittsburgh. So that's how we ended up specifically.
Oh, that's
here.
right. Jeff Doherty with Allstate Insurance has the distinction of being the very first sponsor of the Redemptive Economics podcast, and I couldn't be happier to promote his services. I've known Jeff for many years now, both as his pastor and friend, and man, I can say with confidence that he is a man of strong faith who aligns well with the Redemptive Economics values. So reach out to Jeff. He can offer you options for a wide variety of coverage and services. He's committed to helping Pittsburgh residents assess their immediate and long-term needs and choose options that will help you achieve your goals. When you want to explore options for protecting your home, personal property, or financial future, Jeff Doherty is your guy. You'll find Jeff's contact information in the show notes. Hey, go grab a cup of coffee with him, get to know him, even if it's just to review your current coverage in case you need to make adjustments. And I promise you're going to love Jeff every bit as much as I do. Okay, I do remember. I think I remember you saying that before. But it's okay. Forgive me. For some reason, I had Indiana in my mind. You grew up here in Pittsburgh?
I'm from Indiana. And then Indiana's so small. So Pittsburgh actually feels big to me in terms of U.S. cities. And then so he was working for an outsourcing company, actually, that is based, their headquarters here in Pittsburgh. So they just transferred him to their local office, and it was just like the easiest, best move.
Okay. And you guys have been here now for 2 years, I think you said, right?
Yes, and we are loving Pittsburgh. And I say Pittsburgh and Africa have a lot in common because you don't want to go there, and then once you get there, you're like, this is great. Like, here.
Oh, Valerie, that is the greatest statement I've heard in a long time. Pittsburgh and Africa are very alike because you don't want to go there, but when you get there, you love it. Oh, man. Sorry.
It's true.
It's hard for me to get over that one because, you try to convey to other Pittsburghers what Pittsburgh is like, but we're from here, and I don't know, it is what it is, but I think we need people to hold up mirrors like you just did in that moment to describe what Pittsburgh is like. Oh, that is funny. Okay, so you are enjoying it. It's going well here in Pittsburgh.
It's great. It's a great place to be, especially when you have kids. It's like,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're enjoying it. And people are really nice. And yeah, it's green, lots of things to do with kids, and we like it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's awesome. I love hearing that. And I'm really glad you're here. I'm really glad that God brought you here. And I'm excited to hopefully be able to expand the awareness here in Pittsburgh about what you are doing, because I think there's a ton of incredible business leaders here in Pittsburgh that would absolutely just flip over what you're doing and would be excited to get to know you better in your business.
We do have a growing list of clients in Pittsburgh, and it's really fun to connect local businesses. I think there's like a myth that like outsourcing takes jobs away from Americans. So we really try and say, if you're a business owner, you probably can't afford a virtual assistant in America, so you just don't hire someone. So now you can, and they're located in Kenya. Or like your team probably hates cold calling and they have expensive American salaries, so it's not actually the best use of their time. So hire someone in Ethiopia who has an American accent, and they're going to put appointments on your sales team so that they actually make more revenue. So we have to do a lot of I think education in the US about that. But yeah, so far it's going really well.
Is it primarily Ethiopia that these virtual assistants are coming from?
I would say probably 80% of where we hire is from Ethiopia at the moment, because that's where my biggest network was. And so everybody we hire is like someone I knew, but we are slowly expanding. So we have Kenya, Uganda, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Nigeria, and hoping to expand more throughout the continent, because there's just great talent, great college grads everywhere. And every country, again, because they're different, they have their own kind of focus on education. So Ethiopians have more US accents. Zimbabwe, you get great bookkeepers from there. Kenyans have some of the best VAs. So you start to see there's different countries to source more from, and that makes it really fun.
That is so neat. Okay, I love that. So, pitch Cradle, if you would, and you've got time. It doesn't have to be an elevator pitch. You can take your time, tell the story, share a little bit. Tell us where the value proposition is for Cradle especially if you're a business here in Pittsburgh who needs, as you said, someone to do accounting or virtual assistants, they're just starting. Yeah, share a little bit about the value proposition of it.
I would say Cradle helps you get access to affordable talent. So if you're a small or medium business owner and you need affordable team members who work really hard and are really good, you want to hire from the African continent. So instead of hiring a virtual assistant from the Philippines or a developer from India, you can do the same thing in African countries. And one of the benefits is that for decades, African governments have been educating their youth. So now you get this surplus of really well-educated college graduates who are really smart and sharp and want to work hard, but they can't find jobs locally. There's a massive demand for jobs in Africa. I think the continent has to create 18 million jobs every year until 2035 to keep up with the demand of professionals entering the workforce.
Wow. Yeah.
So you get these educated people who don't have jobs, and then you can connect them to your company and you can pay them super well, and it's really competitive. And so they do a great job for you. But to give you maybe a little backstory of how I actually ended up in outsourcing is that when I was in Ethiopia, I randomly got a job at a US outsourcing company that was working with these like massive Fortune 500 companies. Like you have their apps on your phone. They're like probably a bank really well. I'm not going to say their names, but I started doing that. And that's when I started seeing like the job creation potential with outsourcing. Like overnight, we would get a request for 100 people. That's 100 new jobs. And it was a win. So it hit the box of what I wanted to do. Until I started realizing that one, these Fortune 500 companies pay horrifically, like 50 cents an hour. Sometimes I don't even call them by their names. They're just like a number. They're just like derogatory to them. And I was like, oh, I really don't like that part. And I don't like that the people who get these jobs still have to be like an Uber driver, like on the weekends, because 50 cents an hour is actually not livable anymore in Ethiopia. And all these companies were like hiding the fact that they were hiring from the continent. So they would talk about we had an office in Dubai that had like 5 people in it. So they would say that they had a team in Dubai, but really it was done in Ethiopia. So when we moved back to Pittsburgh, I was like, I'm going to start my own company. I'm going to do outsourcing. It's going to be cool. I'm going to go with the fact that we want you to think it's cool to hire from the continent. We're not going to hide it. We're going to be really proud about it. We're going to pay way better. We're going to let people work from home, and we're going to match them with like their dream career. So that way it feels like a really good fit. Like you're getting like your VA is now your BFF that's helping you do everything. And we wanted it to be more personable. So that's how I got into outsourcing. And then how Cradle is different than most outsourcing companies is that we just treat our people really well, and then they do a good job. So imagine that. Yeah,
you value your people, pay them well. Are you finding that more Africans are preferring something like you because they're making more than they would in a different place?
Yeah, a million times. It's we're not even, they don't even have to think about it. Like as soon as they hear the wage, they're like, they're ready to work with us because it's so much more. And because traffic in some of these African capital cities is crazy. So instead of doing 3-hour ride to the office and getting paid 50 cents an hour, you can work from home, get paid really well, be with your kids all day or go to grad school during the day and have a really cool client that you can really grow with. And what I love about our clients is some of them they're so open to remote talent that they don't even pigeonhole them into being at that entry level forever. Like if our team members are proving themselves, they'll keep moving them up in their company. And I think that's also how the work is shifting to the global workplace, and how the younger our clients are, the more open they are to putting our virtual assistant into a management position. And it just shows you, things are changing. But we are really competitive, so we don't have a hard time finding talent. If anything, we want to keep placing them because there's just such a huge need, and we have so many really good people that we want to place and find jobs for.
Truth at Work executive peer advisory groups are a life and business changing experience. Trust me, I've experienced it myself. It made such an impact on me that I stepped out to become a chapter president myself. At Truth at Work, we're dedicated to helping Christian business leaders who feel isolated and overwhelmed. Our community of like-minded peers are here to help leaders like you live out your faith in the marketplace and build your business on biblical principles. Christian business leaders are transformed through these peer advisory groups that apply biblical truth for living out our faith in all areas of life. If you'd like to learn more about Truth at Work, email me, Mike Hatch, at mhatch@truthatwork.org, Or you can email my counterpart, Dave Hartman, at dhartman@truthatwork.org. That's really cool. Okay, I love that. What are some things as a company, like, again, I'm thinking a company here in Pittsburgh, or it could be wherever, but what are some things they need to consider as they're thinking about hiring someone through you guys? What are some things even ahead of time maybe to consider?
First of all, they have to be willing, you have to train, and you have to realize, we say it's like a 90-day ramp up. Hopefully you get results before then, but you can't say on day 4, they're not hitting their full KPI as a cold caller. So it's just like any other remote team member. You have to invest in them. The companies that give a week of training and then mentoring for the first couple months are the ones that get the best results. So you have to treat them like any other remote team member. And I think people always say, are they willing to work US hours? But they actually prefer US hours. And people wonder about the accent, but the accent can be really good and you can screen for it. So I think people just have to be open, do an interview, meet some actual candidates, and then just train them and set up clear training and KPIs and ramping up. And then it's a really great win.
Yeah, I'm really curious about this question. I interviewed Darren Grove, who is owns a software development company here in Pittsburgh. Amazing Christian man, business leader. He's involved because he's in software and product development and the process of product development. And he said, if you're doing it right as an entrepreneur, you don't end up where you think you're going to when you get started, basically. So first of all, that's like the story of your journey. You went on this backpacking trip, and then you didn't know when you started out you're going to start a VA company, right? Like this. If you would, talk about your experience and your journey in that. What are some things that, as you were moving along, that were unexpected, that kind of surprised you, that caused you to have to pivot a little bit in your business? I'm just curious about some of the things you've learned.
I've learned a lot. Actually, in the beginning, I was so focused on creating jobs in Africa. So our website we're in the process of updating it. But originally we were doing products as well, because I was like, Ethiopia has a great coffee. We'll bring in coffee. And like the theme is that we're creating jobs, whether you want products or to hire talent. But then we realized the person who's hiring a virtual assistant gets very confused when there's like chocolate bars also for sale on the website. Like looking back,
right.
What were we thinking? And the outsourcing part was just taking off like wildfire. Like it was just so fast that we decided to focus on that. So that was a big lesson, that what is obvious to me doesn't actually work well when you get it from a business owner's perspective. Yeah. I think another thing is, originally when I was doing this, I was like, maybe it'll be like a 4-hour work week. It could just be like a side hustle. And then as I got into it, I was like, first of all, no, it takes a lot more work to do this and make it seamless and actually a good win. And also, I just realized that the massive amount of need. Like our clients kept asking us, can we do more, and kept referring us. So we were growing faster than I expected. And then I just realized the need for jobs as well. And a lot of times at Cradle, we are the sole income for an entire family. So right now we have a husband and a wife who work for us, or we have 2 sisters who work for us, and they just referred the 3rd sister to us. And so we are like their sole income. And with that comes with a massive amount of responsibility to make sure that it's sustainable jobs. So that's been a big switch. Whereas this isn't a business I'm going to start and sell. Like this is me for the next 20 years, I think, like building this up and making it big and making the reputation for hiring in the continent a good thing and a big thing. So yeah, there's a lot of pivots, a lot of learning, all kinds of things. So it's definitely, it's a journey.
It almost sounds like starting the business kind of revealed this passion in you for this. And then your heart grew for them even more as you're continuing. And now you see yourself long-term here doing this. It's not just a short, hey, build a business and we're going to sell in 5 years kind of thing.
No, yeah, we're in it because, again, the demand is huge. Like the need for jobs is so big. And I talked to one of the biggest like outsourcing experts in the world. Like governments come to him to help him like do this. And he was talking about how it took India decades and decades before they got their reputation. And it took Philippines decades. But what everybody in Africa knows is that we do not have that time. We don't have decades. And so we need to go all out. And that's why we do like lots of podcasts and like lots of LinkedIn. And we're starting to do YouTube now because we need to create that awareness now. And it's going to take a lot of people and a lot of education to do that.
Man, okay. And I'm sure your husband, as Alula, as he has been involved with you in this, I'm sure being married to him and seeing the response and the impact being made, I'm sure that has obviously really pricked your hearts in terms of this being definitely a calling, right?
Yeah. No, he's super supportive. He's like a software engineer, so I think
Okay.
he is like our unofficial tech advisor. He's also really into AI, so I think a lot of people have that question like, do you outsource or do you use AI? And we feel like you outsource and then you give them the AI tools to make them good, and then you integrate that with your team so that they do well. So he's like my go-to AI expert. And then recently, we took on our first summer intern, and she's our niece, so it's like my husband's sister's daughter. So that was really cool.
Okay.
Full circle to like then hire like family members from him into our company. So yeah, he's really involved and very supportive.
I thought before you said earlier, you said you started the business when you guys moved to Pittsburgh. So it's been 2 years. You came out of the blocks fast then. From my perspective, as because we've been connected on LinkedIn for maybe 2 years or something like that. And I feel like you were all over the place and putting yourself out there and doing a great job advocating on behalf of Cradle.
So I actually officially launched Cradle a month before I gave birth. So not the best timing. It actually was a slow start. But LinkedIn, because I didn't know anybody locally in Pittsburgh and it hadn't been in the US really since LinkedIn became my go-to. So LinkedIn has been huge for our business. It's how we got like most of our clients early on. And today it's still one of our biggest funnels. And so now it's really cool because when clients come to us, we just finished up like a LinkedIn course. So we teach you how to use LinkedIn better using like the same tips I use. And then we tell you like what parts can your virtual assistant do to actually help you grow your LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm happy you've seen me on LinkedIn, but it just shows you the power of that platform.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a great, okay. Yeah, we're probably going to have you back on at some point and just do an episode just on that, optimizing your LinkedIn profile, utilizing VAs to do that. Oh my gosh, that would be...
I love LinkedIn so much. Yeah. It's so good. For any business owner out there, you have to be on LinkedIn. And I used to hate it, but once you get into it, it's really powerful. We've gotten offers for grants, investment, speaking opportunities. There's so many things that have come out of LinkedIn, even just like growing relationships. That's how I met you, is seeing you on LinkedIn and knowing you're in Pittsburgh. And yeah, we have, if you hire like a marketing assistant from us, we say let's hire them for 10 hours and use our LinkedIn course, and then you grow your LinkedIn and don't have to put as much effort into it yourself. And you have someone to help you do some like the back end support.
As you were getting started, my guess is you were in Ethiopia when you decided, okay, I'm going to do this, right? And I'm sure you and your husband are talking about this. You're trying to figure it out. Maybe you came up with a business plan. Maybe you didn't. It seems to be optional these days. What was that process like of getting started? Again, I guess you were pregnant though too. That you said that.
Right. I was still working for that other outsourcing company when I was in Ethiopia. And even when I first came to Pittsburgh, and originally Cradle was going to be one of I pitched it to them as a separate business unit, like a ethical side of what they're doing that's more supporting Ethiopia. But ultimately we didn't have the same vision. And I was just so gung-ho about really promoting the continent in a cool way, like in a trendy way. So when I got my first Cradle client, they gave me the option to either take Cradle and go on my own or to keep it part of their company. And the owner was like really gracious and we parted ways, but like on really good terms. And yeah, I got my first client officially through LinkedIn like a month before I gave birth. And that's when I was like, I'm just going to quit and go for it.
Okay. So that doesn't often happen that way. Often you part ways and anytime there's an entrepreneur who's within a kind of company and they're often will push against some things and there'll be some resistance. Often that can end badly for some people, but praise God that it sounds like it went well for you. That's amazing.
Yeah, I feel like we left on really great terms. The other thing, I'm just going to say this, one of the reasons why I was also okay with quitting is because I couldn't get a maternity leave. And I would say now that we are probably one of their biggest competitors. And so I tell people, like, if you're not giving good maternity or paternity leave, your team member is going to quit and become a competitor. And
That's right.
One of the cool things about what we're doing now is that a lot of our virtual assistants, or other team members are actually able to fill in for a little bit while you're able to offer that benefit to your team members. So if you're a small business owner wondering how can I give like a 3-month paternity leave, you can plug in some virtual assistants, some cold callers, some other people might not be able to do all of their job, but can take off the task from your other team members so that collectively you can cross-train, give a really great maternity leave or paternity leave, still get your work covered, and it doesn't cost you a lot.
Man, that is really cool. Redemptive Economics is completely listener-supported and dependent on the contributions of listeners. If you resonate with the message of Redemptive Economics and want to support the cause, there are 3 ways you can partner with us. The first is you can subscribe to the podcast for $5 a month and unlock all the amazing interviews and content without the interruption of advertisements. Secondly, you can donate to Redemptive Economics, either making a one-time gift or supporting monthly to help us offset the production costs and reach more people for the sake of the gospel. Lastly, if you're a business, you can choose to advertise with us. Right now, we're offering a limited number of spots for sponsorships for the first year at $150 per month or $1,800 for the year. I would be so grateful for your partnership. Check out the show notes for all the links that will lead to more information about how to support our mission to empower Christian entrepreneurs. All right, so as we're thinking about, because again, I'm hoping through this podcast that we are empowering Christian entrepreneurs to make a redemptive economic impact. You clearly are doing that in spades, just in amazing ways. And again, I just love how thoughtful you were in the process to learn and to enter in. People are going to get tired of me saying this, but entrepreneur means entree, to enter in. In fact, the etymology of the word, of that part of the word, insinuates diving into the water, into the deep, into the sea, and swimming out. And then preneur or prende has to do with grasping, laying hold of, or learning new knowledge. So as we dive out into our entrepreneurial endeavors, we're venturing out into the unknown. And you spoke to that about all the different things you had to learn and the ways you had to pivot and change your understanding about where you were trying to get to. That's entrepreneurship, right? You've given some great examples of that. But speak, if you would, to a newer entrepreneur who's maybe either on the cusp of wanting to step out to do something new, and they feel like God laid something on their heart that they want to embark on and accomplish his redemptive purposes through. What would you say to them in terms of their journey, what to expect based on some of your experience?
It's definitely hard. It's hard. Like looking back, now that we've come through the first 2 years, it wasn't like it was amazing. There was a lot of, oh my goodness, we have small kids. I quit my job. It was a cushion job. What was I thinking? You lose clients because you messed up and you learn from it. So yeah, I would definitely say when you hear stories like this, it's fun to tell now, but it wasn't easy. So don't give up. A lot of like motivating yourself, like read those encouraging Bible verses, like, see how people went through hard times in the Bible. Like it's part of the journey. I think one thing that comforted me is how many, I think like actors and comedians said that like the first 2 years they went out and did something and they weren't very good at it. I know Amy Schumer talks about how like the first 2 years she was horrible at stand-up and now she's really good. So giving yourself, I think, that grace that you're not perfect, but you're figuring it out. And I would just always say you really do got to trust what God laid on your heart. Like I wanted to go to Ethiopia back in the day and I did it, and it wasn't what I thought, but it was what it should be. And then I had this desire to go to across Africa backpacking, which at the time nobody was supportive of, right? Like they thought I should get a job and settle down and get married and have kids. And I wanted to backpack. And then that's what changed my trajectory and led me to meeting my husband and to what I'm doing now. And then a lot of people really doubted me when I started Cradle a month before giving birth. And then now everybody asks me if I can hire their relatives. So I think you really have to follow what God's laid on your heart. And it might be hard, but you'll get through it. And then it's going to be everything it should be and it was supposed to be.
I really appreciate how you described that it's going to be what it should be versus maybe what you initially expected it to be. It's
going to be different. But if it was what you wanted it to be, it wouldn't be as good.
Oh,
right?
So right. But that takes a very humble attitude. You know what I mean? It takes being willing to hold things loosely.
Yeah, but I think like when I went on my backpacking trip, again, I thought that would be like a 6-week trip.
Yeah.
And then I just kept going for 7 months. So it wasn't what I thought it would be, but it was so much better. So again, Cradle, I thought would be like a side hustle. And now it's like my life mission for the next forever. Like I don't see myself coming out of it. So yeah, I just know that God always has something bigger for you. So you don't want to know what it really is because it's going to be better than you can imagine.
Yeah. Do you think Lula at some point would step out of his 9 to 5 and come in with you full time? I'm just curious.
I could see him doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, especially because he has so many, like he's more like on the software engineer side. So we don't do developers at the current moment. So I could see it or him doing something similar, but he's definitely like an entrepreneur at heart, I would say as well. And then partly, I mean, in all honesty, I was able to do this because he did have like a stable job, like the stable, boring 9 to 5 job. It allowed us to do that. So I really do hope that once Cradle's like even bigger, that like I can do the same for him and provide that stability.
That's really cool. I love the partnership you guys have in that. I know just getting to meet you and seeing the life and the light that exudes from you, I know that comes also from a husband who's really believes in you and loves you and is encouraging you in what you're doing. I love that he's a very willing and enthusiastic partner in this with you. Praise God for that, man. Okay, so where can folks contact you? Or if folks want to learn more about Cradle, where do they find you online? Of course, you mentioned LinkedIn, so you can find her on LinkedIn.
That, my LinkedIn.
No, go ahead.
No, I am on LinkedIn a lot. And then you can just also email me, like Valerie@cradle.com. I would say Cradle is spelled CRDLE.
Yes.
Again, looking back, not the best. The naming, because now I have to spell it out every time. But we named it Cradle because Africa is the cradle of humanity. It's like the birthplace of civilization. And so, again, we really wanted to be the first to really foster that reputation for the African continent in hiring. And because it's so cool that it's like such an ancient continent, and we wanted to highlight the cool things about it. So that's how we come up with Cradle. And so people can email me or find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, that's excellent. Or they're going to find you at one of the business networking groups that I'm going to get you to here in Pittsburgh. And hopefully
we'll have to start going to them.
Man, thank you so much, Valerie. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you'd want to talk about? Or is there something you'd want to mention?
I would say for the faith-based entrepreneur who maybe grew up in the church thinking you have to go on missions trips or things like that, just pivot that a little bit and realize that the best thing you can actually do is to hire from the continent, and it's going to be a win for your business. And so that's what makes it so cool. So whether you do it by yourself or with another outsourcing company or through Cradle, like I don't even care how you do it, but I am really passionate about helping people hire from the continent. And I hope people at least give it a try and see how it goes. And I know it's going to go well. So I hope people just try it.
Yeah. If folks connect with you on LinkedIn, they're going to see pretty regularly how great it is, because they're gonna see your enthusiastic face come up talking about it and sharing about it. You do a great job representing Cradle. You do a great job representing Africa and Ethiopia and these places you serve. Man, I'm just grateful for you. Really grateful for you and the impact you're having. Thank you for being. And I think I said this too before with you. For whatever reason, Africa has continued to come up in my consciousness for whatever reason. Whether I connect with someone from Kenya, for example, on LinkedIn. Or, of course, people know this, and I talked to you about it, I'm into Bitcoin, and Africa is a huge continent when it comes to Bitcoin. And so I end up meeting a lot of people in the Bitcoin industry from Africa, especially Nigeria, for example. And there's just something, I think God is doing something, and I think that something, the epicenter, people talk about Latin America being a center for God's work and the movement of the Holy Spirit. I think something special is happening in Africa, too.
I think anybody who's been there would say, like, when I'm on the African continent, I feel alive. And part of that's because maybe I don't have my cell phone, or like I'm just out more in nature. And it's different, so you're a little bit more present. But every time, I think everybody would agree that you're much more present when you're there, and you never go to Africa once. You always go back at least another time. I've never met anybody who's gone and never come back. It becomes, you just want to keep being there. And even for people who also don't want to hire, like you said, like there's so much business opportunities, whether that's getting involved in Bitcoin, or maybe you are importing coffee or cool clothing, or there's a really cool leather company in Ethiopia that we love. So there's just so many options. But yeah, be open to the business there. And in truth, like other countries around the world are doing great business in Africa, and the US is really behind because we view it in nonprofits in pity. But like the Europeans, the Chinese, the Saudis, like they're doing big business in the African continent, and the US is actually really behind in that way.
Man, I'm glad you said that. That's so crazy. Yeah, because in America, what comes in our minds is all the propaganda that has been splashed all over the TVs and internet of African kids in bare feet, distended stomachs and things like that, thinking, and that's our view of what Africa is this place of just desperate poverty, and that is there, but there's so much more.
One of my favorite things is when we do an interview, we always say, like, we tell the candidate to introduce themselves and also give like a personal fact, like, what do you do in your spare time? And it's always like, oh, and I watch true crime or Love Island, or it's all these things, or like Harry Potter is my favorite movie. And it's just like, you start to realize how much more similar they are to you or to like your kids in a really fun way. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, I love that. All right. Thank you, Valerie, so much for being with us today. And we're definitely going to have you back on and talk about some of the things you mentioned having to do with VAs or optimizing your LinkedIn profile, things like that. Man, there's just so much that folks could glean from your experience that you've learned over these last couple years. So thank you, Valerie, for being with us.
Thank you.
Let's get to work!